All right. Can you hear me, Michael?
I can.
You can. Okay, good. All right. Welcome, everyone. It's 7 p.m., so we'll jump right in tonight. Welcome to our Historically Speaking lecture series. I get this question a lot. Hold on, this wants to be okay. So a lot of people will ask, what if I can't make it? I can't make the presentation. If you ever miss one, you can usually find it on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/at MCHA1898. So if you bookmark that one, you'll have many, many great topics on Monmouth history right at your fingertips. For those of you who are new to us and wondering what MCHA is and what we do here, I'm going to tell you that the big building you see here is a little deceiving. Yes, it's a very grand looking building, and it was built as a museum in 1931 to house the collection of the association, which was founded in 1898. So we've been around for over 125 years now, and our mission is to collect and preserve the history of Monmouth County. We do this by growing our amazing collection of over 35,000 objects, over 1,300 archival collections. We conserve historic documents and objects to protect and preserve them for posterity. We show award-winning exhibits, maintain 4 historic house museums, host free programs like this one. We offer K through 12 history education, fascinating social media. If you don't follow us on Facebook, Bernadette Rogoff, our Director of Collections, does an amazing job. You'll learn so much. Digital resources on our website and genealogical research in our research library. And if it sounds like it takes a village to run MCHA, here is the village. These are the same people who do all of this. We clean the bathrooms, we take out the garbage, we handle all the crazy tech issues, which usually entails like a great deal of cursing. I'll just tell you that little behind the scenes tidbit. And we operate on a very small budget. So while the big building looks very stately, we are a private nonprofit, a small one, and the preservation of history, the objects, the documents, the houses, it's very, very expensive. We do need donations to help us operate. So if you think your $5 won't make a difference, it definitely does when it comes in with many other $5 donations. So please consider becoming a member or supporting us with a donation of any size. We greatly appreciate any help we receive. Our new exhibit is Storm of Revolution, covering the years 1775 to 1783 in Monmouth. I'm just going to take less than 2 minutes to give you a quick preview of this new exhibit. We have some amazing things here, including an original flag from the Battle of Monmouth. This has been on loan twice to the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia, and we finally have it back again, so you could see that right up close. We have a gallery upstairs where you can learn about the perils of life in the 18th century, and in particular, the importance of taverns, which you can hear about from our local tavern keeper. See some authentic 18th century barware, some very cringy early medical devices. Find out what the soldiers ate and test your luck with some common 18th century diseases. One of my favorite experiences in this room is having the opportunity to smell George Washington. That's right, I said smell him. Caswell Massey is the earliest perfumer in America, and they still make his cologne, number 6, according to the original archival recipe. So if you want to know what George smelled like, you'll have to come in and visit us. We also have a number of other scents for you to test out as well. The Hartshorn Gallery is our document room where you can read the stories of Revolutionary Monmouth in the original writer's hand. You can view an actual letter from Washington here, one of several in our collection. Just when you thought you'd seen every detail of this painting, we've brought it to you in a way that you've never seen before. Here's a few seconds of the 5-minute documentary that tells the story behind Washington rallying the troops at Monmouth. Okay, that was pretty cool, right? So you can view the full movie at MCHA along with all the rest of it, including the incredible original painting. Tonight, we have Michael Adelberg, one of the most amazing researchers I've had the chance to work with. Not only are his sources vast and very meticulous, but if you've ever read any of the 250 for the 250th articles, you know he knows how to tell a great story. Michael is the author of several books, including his latest, The American Revolution on the Jersey Shore, and his research has been recognized by the New Jersey Historical Commission, the New Jersey Studies Academic Alliance, the David Library of the American Revolution, and the government of Monmouth County. So without further ado, please welcome Michael Adelberg.
Well, thanks so much, Dana, and really appreciate your warm introduction of me, and really appreciate the uh, teasers of your exhibits, including the Storm of Revolution. And I've always loved going through the Hartshorn room and seeing the documents. And you all truly do an amazing amount of work and amazingly good work at MCHA. And I'm just so happy to have had the opportunity to work with MCHA over the last 30 years, and you all have been a terrific supporter of my work. So, with that, though, I get a chance to talk about a really neat topic tonight, which is the nation just had its 250th. And I think there is an assumption that July 4th, 1776 was probably a really happy night across America, and there were fireworks celebrations and whatever else. And I'm here this evening to talk about what Monmouth County looked at on or around the day that America declared its independence. And in Monmouth County, things were extraordinarily messy at that very moment where the Continental Congress declared the United States of America to be, in fact, a separate country separated from Great Britain. And I'll talk with you a little bit about that tonight. But first, let's just start with a little bit of background. So, Dana, your introduction was terrific. I'll just note really quickly, I've been doing this for more than 30 years and have been fortunate enough to maintain all my research in two large databases, which allows me to do a lot of customized research and customized lectures, including the customized content you'll see tonight. Um, So the 250 for the 250th was a great partnership with MCHA, and Dana was just a model partner to work with. Just a quick plug for the project in case you haven't already spent some time looking at the articles. Um, of the 250, many of the articles are on topics that have not been touched by modern historians. And it's far more than a look at military events. We look at the local politics of the county, including the factions that existed between patriots or Whigs, supporters of the revolution. And one of my favorite topics is actually the schisms that existed within the people who supported the revolution, much less their loyalist opponents. But also a number of the articles are on economic topics. We look at the major congregations of Monmouth County. We look at certain particularly interesting biographical figures who have neglected a lot of study to date. Um, and today's lectures, the lecture tonight is built off of some of those articles. Actually, articles 24 through 30 are the focus of tonight's lecture, and the articles flow chronologically from here. And of course, here's the link if you have not already found your way to the 250 for the 250th. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Monmouth County as it looked immediately prior to the Declaration of Independence. Um, if you look at the tax lists and total up names on the tax lists, the county had a population of a little more than 12,000. If that's what's on the tax lists, the real population would have been higher than that because there were always itinerants, people who were missed by the tax collectors, um, agricultural laborers who were in and out of the county, sailors who were in and out of the county. And so the real population on any given day would be higher than collected in the tax list. Monmouth County was the third largest New Jersey county. It included Ocean County, at today's Ocean County. And while it was a large county, it's important to remember population size and distance in revolutionary America. In that Monmouth County was a relatively large county, but if you were to get every single person in the county, get them to Newark and get them to go to a New Jersey Devils hockey game, they wouldn't sell out the arena. And it's important to remember Monmouth County and Ocean County together have 1 million people today, but the population was less than 2% of that in the Revolutionary era. Similarly, it's important to remember distance. If you lived, let's say, in Shrewsbury and had to go to Freehold, the county seat, to conduct business or vote, that was a full day's travel just to get to the county seat and then a full day travel back. And if you lived, in the southern part of the county, Ocean County today, it could be 2 full days of travel. So it's important to remember just how far and spread apart people were from each other. Monmouth County had a large African American minority. About 10% of the population was African American. That included both slaves and freeborn. And most of the county was oriented toward New York in its commerce, but the western part of the county around Allentown and the southernmost part of the county around Egg Harbor and some of those Ocean County inlets were more oriented toward Philadelphia. There was a small maritime economy, but most of the county was agricultural, and agriculture was the path most Americans took toward acquiring wealth. Um, the county had its share of disorder in the years leading up to the Revolution. That included resistance to British taxes and the stamp tax in particular. There were Sons of Liberty chapters in the county. There were land riots that closed down the courts in 1769 and 1770. And by 1773, we have evidence that the order of local office holders aligned with the royal governor. Order was beginning to break down and then really begins to break down in 1775. Okay, let's talk about loyalty and this question of which side are you on? Um, we today commonly use the term patriots to describe people who supported the revolution. And you will see the word patriots occasionally used in revolutionary documents, but far more often, the supporters of the revolution called themselves Whigs. And they did because that was the political party of reform in Great Britain, and they identified with the reformers in Great Britain. So patriots or Whigs, or sometimes called rebels by the British, uh, supported independence. They were most populous and organized in Freehold and Middletown townships. And remember, the county only had 6 townships. So these are much larger townships, and Freehold Township would go roughly from uh, Jackson today to Middletown Township went all the way out to Sandy Hook. So it's a pretty large geographical swath when I talk about these 2 townships. And these 2 townships raised 200 men for the Continental Army, or more properly, the flying camp that was attached to the Continental Army in early 1776. So a lot of the most ardent patriots or Whigs actually marched out of the county and were serving in Washington's Continental Army at the time of the Declaration of Independence. There were also loyalists or Tories. The people who supported the British called themselves loyalists. However, their opponents called them Tories to associate them with the party of the obnoxious British taxes that the colonists objected to so strongly. They opposed independence. They were strongest in Upper Freehold Township, which is the westernmost part of Monmouth County, and then also along the shore, areas that were ethnically English. And while 200 men are being raised for the Continental Army, there are probably a comparable number of active loyalists who become active insurrectionists starting in June of 1776. In the middle, you have neutrals, or to use a name that were put on these people, trimmers. It's probably fair to say that early in the war, the majority of the Monmouth County population was not willing to take an action that would firmly and permanently associate them with one side or the other. These people were called trimmers because they blew at the wind. And uh, Many trimmers probably had some preference for one side or the other, but they avoided taking an action that would risk their life, liberty, or property, at least as long as they could. Many trimmers ultimately are forced to take one side or the other as the war goes on. Okay, in the ramp up to the war, royal authority breaks down and local government begins to reform around local committees that enforce the British boycott. While there was what was called the Continental Association, which citizens were supposed to sign, and there were many citizens who signed the Continental Association saying they would support the Continental Congress and embargo British products. However, regardless of your signature on the Continental Association, there were a lot of Monmouth Countians who continued to quietly trade with British interests, particularly British ships that would dock in and around Sandy Hook, and had men who needed to be fed, officers who had um, desires for uh, high quality fresh provisions, and the British paid in gold. So that was a powerful incentive to trade with them, regardless of whether you might be opposed to British tax policies. We also had militia companies forming outside of royal control as early as 1775. Um, but much of Monmouth County resisted effectively mustering into new militia companies. In fact, even in Freehold Township, which was the most solidly Whig of Monmouth County's townships, there was still a militia company that was nicknamed the Tory Company because it continued to operate outside of continental control and continental loyalty. Along the shore, where you had residents who resisted militia service, you had residents who resisted um, the embargo on British goods. Nonetheless, when a British or British allied ship would ground in one of the inlets during a storm or because it was damaged during the long Atlantic voyage, shore residents were fantastic opportunists, and the taking a stranded British ship as a prize and then being able to sell it, the ship itself and its provisions was a once in a lifetime economic opportunity. And so shore residents who on all other days might lean loyalist, on the days that there was a stranded British ship would become sterling and enthusiastic Whigs. The British land and take over Sandy Hook in the spring of 1776, and it would be Sandy Hook Peninsula would be held by the British until the end of 1783. So the British continually held Sandy Hook longer than any other piece of the Atlantic seaboard. And the first battle in Monmouth County to occur in the Revolution was an attempt to dislodge the British from Sandy Hook. It was on June 21st. So it was 2 weeks before the signing of the Declaration of Independence, when a regiment of Massachusetts Continentals marched up the Sandy Hook Peninsula with a couple of small cannon and fired multiple cannon shot at the lighthouse. But the small cannonball did not uh, threaten the lighthouse, and the lighthouse and a small British guard at the lighthouse was safe inside until a British warship fired on the Continentals and dispersed them. And then only a week later, on June 29th, a enormous British fleet with 25,000 soldiers, so twice the number of people who lived in Monmouth County, uh, anchors at Sandy Hook, and the first Americans to see this awesome British armada are Monmouth Countyans, and Monmouth Countyans are the ones who get word to the New Jersey Provincial Congress and then the Continental Congress that the British have landed. And the British, fortunately for the people of Monmouth County, the British turn their attention north and head toward New York. But there are the Monmouth militia just on the other side of the Sandy Hook Peninsula on the Highlands are watching this very large, impressive British force as it gathers. Okay, so let's go to the county as the Declaration of Independence is uh, passed. So the Western, we have the beginnings of Monmouth County Loyalists marching off to join the British at Sandy Hook. So on June 29th, just as they are assembling, General Howe, Commander-in-Chief of the British Army, is delighted to report to the British Foreign Secretary that the first Americans to come to meet him are coming up from Shrewsbury. And he writes that 60 men came over from the neighborhood of Shrewsbury with a few arms, all desirous to serve. And they talk about there being 500 more ready to join them. This first group was probably the group led by Elisha Lawrence, and it was raised from Freehold and Upper Freehold townships. A second group joined just a few days later from the Shore area, and this was led by John Morris. John Morris was a British officer during a lieutenant during the 7 Years' War, who settled at Manasquan after the war. And there would soon be two smaller groups of loyalists led by John Longstreet of Freehold and John Taylor of Colts Neck, who would join the British at Sandy Hook with smaller parties of men. And there were no doubt smaller groups still dribbling into the British all throughout this process. So these Monmouth Countyans would become the 1st and 2nd Battalion of the New Jersey Volunteers, and the New Jersey Volunteers would be the largest loyalist corps in the British Army. And we sometimes forget how many of the uh, redcoats who fought in America against Washington's army were in fact Americans. And during the Battle of Monmouth, a crude estimate is that about a third of the British Army was American, about a third of the British Army was German, and about a third of the British Army was British. Um, while roughly 200 loyalists join the British in this first wave, it's important to note that most loyalists and loyalist-leaning Monmouth Countyans are staying home, for now at least. Um, as this is going on, Upper Freehold, the westernmost part of the county, is in a state of rebellion or quasi-rebellion. So the New Jersey Provincial Congress has a number of notations about insurgents in Monmouth County. One says they take every measure in their county that contravene the regulations of Congress. And the New Jersey government, because there aren't enough reliable Monmouth County militia, orders 200 Burlington County militia in to suppress the Loyalist uprising. The Continental Congress learns of this just a day or two later and also wants to suppress the Loyalist insurrection. So on July 2nd, they ask the government of Pennsylvania to send troops into Monmouth County. And on July 4th, the same day of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, George Washington writes a letter worrying about the loyalty and the insurrections in Monmouth County. He writes, the disaffection of the people at that place, unless it is checked and overawed, may become general and very alarming. So, as America embraces independence, parts of America are not embracing independence. A little more on the insurrection in Upper Freehold. It's more or less led by the Lawrence family. And John Lawrence Sr. is one of the most prominent men in all of New Jersey, much less Monmouth County. He had been the province's surveyor. He was responsible for drawing the boundary line between East and West New Jersey. He was an important legislator in the Assembly, which was the legislature under the royal government. His son, Elijah, who led those 60 loyalists to Sandy Hook, he had been the county sheriff under the royal government. And his John Jr. is a prominent physician who splits time between Perth Amboy and Upper Freehold. It's important to note, though, that this insurrection, if we want to call it that, is led by Quakers and it's led by Quaker gentlemen. So it's a nonviolent insurrection. In fact, I haven't found evidence of anyone uh, having bodily harm done to them during this initial insurrection. Um, fut Future loyalist insurrections will get quite violent, but not this one. This one seems to consist primarily of men assembling and declaring that they are opposed to independence and refusing to join the militia, refusing to accept continental money, and otherwise making public statements that they oppose independence and the trappings of the new government. Okay, the question then is if there are dozens of active insurrectionists in Upper Freehold, and there are dozens of active insurrectionists along the shore, are they loyalists or are they trimmers? And my general impression, based on the documents, is that most of them were trimmers who did not were not ready to abandon their homes and go and seek British protection and go and take up arms for the British. And a document that was put together by for the New Jersey Provincial Congress looks at a number of these insurrectionists who were arrested by the Burlington militia and concludes that numbers of them express a willingness to return to their duty on assurances of pardon and alleging that they've been seduced by scheming and malicious reports of others. And they look for a pardon in exchange for going home and behaving themselves. And we'll see this pattern repeat itself again and again and again through the first half of the war, where loyalists and disaffected people will, when the opportunity presents itself, will oppose the revolution. But then when faced with that moment of taking up arms against their neighbors or leaving and fleeing to the British, they choose to stay home if they can just receive pardons. And the pardons are granted again and again and again. And then these same people will often take up arms again when presented the new opportunity. And we see this a number of times over the first half of the war. So the Pennsylvania soldiers, who the Continental Congress requested, arrive in Allentown just a number of days later. And on July 7th, we have documentation of their arrival in Allentown. They know that they are in a dangerous place because the countersign they use for passing the sentry is Tory. So that is clearly a deliberate word choice to remind them that they are in dangerous territory. Um, they also camp in a manner where they are clearly worried that their goods could be looted or stolen. So they camp in a manner where they are tight together in groups of 30, and that there are mounted men on the flanks is so that if something is pilfered and carried away, they have mounted men who could chase down the thieves. There's a friendly fire incident, and then there's documentation that is curious. There's a local tavern keeper who is ordered not to sell liquor to the Pennsylvania soldiers, presumably because the soldiers might be inclined to disorderly conduct. But we also have officers who are miffed because tavern keepers refuse to serve them. And no doubt there might be some ill will between the locals and the Pennsylvanians, particularly if the Pennsylvanians are attempting to pay in continental script, which even at this early point in the war, a lot of Americans are suspicious of and is prone to inflation. So if this is what's going on in the western half of the county, along the northern shore in Shrewsbury, we have a different kind of person coming into the county. This is a very tough time to be a loyalist in New York City. The British are have taken Staten Island and are preparing to invade Brooklyn. And if you are a loyalist in New York City, the local populace is aroused against you. There are incidents of harassment and theft against loyalists, and a number of loyalists choose to leave the city. And because Shrewsbury is close and a place where a lot of these people have kin and commercial ties, and because it's an area where there's a lot of loyalist sympathy. At least a dozen or so New York City loyalists come into Shrewsbury about at this time. Um, a few ask for and receive permission to do so, but it seems that most of these men went without asking permission. And this leads to a series of letters between the New York and New Jersey governor about what to do with these people. The New York the New Jersey governor, William Livingston, calls them the most malignant New York Tories and notes that they're in Shrewsbury. There's letters back and forth between a judge of the courts who's asked to look at these men and hold hearings about them. And ultimately, it appears that at least a few of the more prominent Tories are sent back to New York, but many of them, frankly, are it's a tough time. There are bigger targets of opportunity, bigger problems. And it seems that many of these Tories are just sort of tolerated as they remain in Shrewsbury among kin. And excuse me, even George Washington is concerned about all of this. He talks about people unfriendly to the interests of America, holding correspondence with the enemy from Shrewsbury. So while George Washington clearly has very significant concerns at this time, including trying to defend New York from an imminent British invasion. What the events in Monmouth County are significant enough for him to know about and for him to write about. Another group that's in motion at this time are enslaved people in the eastern part of Monmouth County. This is a time of exceptional tumult. People are in motion in all sorts of directions, and 200 of the most fervent Whigs have removed themselves from the county to serve in Washington's army. 200 of the most fervent loyalists have removed themselves to join the British Army at Sandy Hook. And that means 400 less people to supervise a restive population of slaves. So slaves begin to run off, and many of them run off to the British fleet because the British um, have the opportunity to grant freedom to these runaway slaves. And the British eventually would adopt that as a policy. The royal governor of Virginia had already done so in a very public way. And word travels, and there are slaves who hear about this and begin to leave for Sandy Hook. The most famous of those runaway slaves, a man named Titus, had actually run off several months earlier, but he probably is behind British lines at this time. I wish we had better documentation on the man who would become today known as Colonel Ty, uh, but uh, he was likely behind British lines at this time. However, other slaves from Monmouth County became loyalist partisans during this same time period. And we have documentation of one of those, a man named Sip, who is a Negro man, the property of Peter Parker. The said Negro supposed that the damned rebels would soon be after him, but if they did, he would take shot amongst them because he had a gun given to him by Peter Wardell, a loyalist. Despite all of this trouble inside the county, the call goes out to raise militia to rush to Perth Amboy. Why Perth Amboy? Because it had been a capital, colonial capital of New Jersey, and it was just a narrow body of water away from the British Army, which had taken Staten Island or was in the process of taking Staten Island. So the call goes out for militia volunteers, and despite the exceptional vulnerability and troubles in the county, three companies of Monmouth County militia volunteers are raised. They're raised by Barnes Smock of Middletown, Reuben Randolph of Ocean County, and a name many of you will be familiar with, Joshua Huddy of Colts Neck. This is part of one of Huddy's parts of his service that's less well known. But these three militia captains march off with companies of men and spend a month plus at Perth Amboy guarding it against a potential British attack. Um, if you look at some of the reminiscences put together by the men who marched with these three captains, there's a report that they did take fire from Hessian troops. But beyond that, there's no evidence of any significant combat. And I suspect that whatever occurred were probably loose shots taken across the Arthur Kill, and there's no reason to think that there was any significant combat. Most of the Monmouth County militia that is at least turned out and mustered is on the highlands, standing guard against British attack from Sandy Hook. Okay, so that's the county as it looks in the month of the same month that the Declaration of Independence is signed. And I hope it gives a more nuanced understanding of how America embraced independence, at least in this one particularly war-torn county. Okay, so what happens next? And I'll obviously I could spend weeks on end talking about everything that happened next, but I just want to give you a little bit about what transpires immediately afterward, and then hopefully save some time for questions. Okay, so by the fall of 1776, we have the British Army defeating Washington's Continentals in a series of battles, taking New York and pushing Washington's Continentals across New Jersey into Pennsylvania. Emboldened by all of this, the Loyalists will rise up again in the fall. And that they actually capture a couple of very important Whig leaders, Richard Stockton and John Covenhoven of Freehold, in Freehold. And there are two Loyalist associations that establish themselves, one led by William Taylor in Freehold, one led by Samuel Wright in Long Branch and Shark River. These two associations are discovered and broken up, and then the men are largely captured. Those men who are captured, by the way, have a real tough time of it. They get sent to jail in Philadelphia. Then they get pushed into Western Pennsylvania, and then they eventually end up in Frederick, Maryland, where they have to stay for well into 1777. And a few of them are sent even further and end up in Leesburg, Virginia. And of course, they do it all on foot. There, no one's sparing precious horses and wagons for these captured loyalists. Um, while these two associations are exposed and broken up in November, in December, there would be a much more general loyalist insurrection. And this loyalist insurrection, which would become known as the Tory Ascendancy, actually succeeds to the point that for most of the month of December, the loyalists are in charge of most of Monmouth County, with sort of a quasi government under British appointed commissioners. And if that topic interests you, I write about it quite a bit in the 250 series. So, the 250 series, then, just to give you a sense of topics that go on from August 1776 through the end of the year, you can see the articles here. I also think one of the fun things about the collection is, in addition to reading it chronologically, you can read it by topic. So each topic contains a number of hyperlinks to other articles. So if you were particularly interested in exploring just a particular topic, like Monmouth Countyans illegally trading with the British, for example, you can just bounce on the hyperlinks to get to all the articles that deal with illegal trade. Or if you're interested in the Taylor family, you can bounce on things related to the Taylor family, etc. Um, and Dana is kind enough to have a monthly email that goes out to anyone who wants it, that it provides a little one paragraph teaser each month on the topics that are enjoying their 250th anniversary. So, Dana already noted that MCHA has four fantastic historic home museums. All four of them have an interplay with the Revolution. The Covenhoven House was the scene of British looting and misbehavior with respect to the Covenhoven family and Elizabeth Covenhoven in particular. Marlpit Hall was the home of Edward Taylor, who was a important pre-war leader in the township, who is clearly disaffected from the revolutionary cause and suffers in different ways during the war, but stays home. The Allen House is the scene of a deadly loyalist attack, and the Holmes Hendrickson House is the home of a militia officer. I hope you'll consider reading one of my books. particularly the new one, The American Revolution on the Jersey Shore. And if anyone's particular would ever like to, here's an email address, drop me a line. I'll try to be helpful to you. So I really enjoyed doing this. And if there's time or ability to take some questions, we should do that. And Dana, I am going to stop screen sharing.
Okay. You don't have to. It's okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you don't have to. Okay, so one of our actually wonderful volunteers, um, Mr. Rob Rubinaccio, was asking about your book, The American Revolution in Monmouth County, and how it differed from the book on the Jersey Shore in content.
Oh, well, that's a fun question. So the simple answer is they're very different. They're the American Revolution on the Jersey Shore takes on four particular shore-based topics: the salt works of the Jersey Shore and the need to make salt, and the sort of misadventures of American entrepreneurs who entered the salt making business during very trying times. There's a chapter on privateering. There's a chapter on the illegal trade with the British, which was nicknamed at the time the London trade because it was so prolific. And there's a chapter on the so-called pine robbers, loyalist guerrillas who operated inside the county. The American Revolution in Monmouth County takes on different topics. There's an essay on the scope and severity of the Civil War between loyalists and Whigs. There's a chapter on the Taylor family of Middletown, particularly Edward Taylor and his son George, who was an active loyalist. There's a chapter on the black partisans at Sandy Hook, led by Colonel Ty. And there's an essay on the Association for Retaliation, who were vigilante Whigs who, under exceptional duress from loyalist raiders, embrace sort of eye for an eye vigilantism against real and perceived loyalist opponents. So the two books are both brought about the American Revolution, but they really do cover different topics.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like it. Okay. Was loyalist sympathy greater in Monmouth County than other parts of New Jersey? And if so, were there any conditions in Monmouth County that may account for this?
Yeah, it's a good question, a tough question. If you look at loyalists in the ways that we can easily quantify them, how many loyalist estates were confiscated, how many loyalists go and serve in the British Army, then it appears that Monmouth County and Bergen County are far and away the two most loyalist heavy counties in the state. Um, there may be loyalist leaning people in other parts of the state, particularly the southernmost part of the state, who had less opportunity to express their loyalism because the British weren't so close. If you're a loyalist in Bergen County, you can just get across the Hudson River anytime, and be a loyalist. If you're a loyalist in most parts of Monmouth County, you could get to Sandy Hook and be a loyalist. But if you were a loyalist, down in facing the Delaware River in southern Jersey, with the exception of the short period of time that the British are in Philadelphia, it's much riskier for that would-be loyalist to express their loyalism. They're further away from the British protection, further away from British inducements. So, if you quantify it, the answer is quite simple. It's Monmouth and Bergen, far and away, are the most loyalist centric counties. But I think there may have been would-be loyalists in other counties who simply never had comparable opportunity to express that loyalism.
Mhm. Okay. We have Miles asking, and he's a recent Georgetown history master's grad. Yay, Miles, new history person. Thank you for taking the time for this fascinating presentation. He wants to know what became of the Monmouth loyalists who chose to stay rather than leave after the revolution ended.
Yeah, I one of the 250 articles take on this topic. And what I'd say is if you were not associated with a any particular grisly episode, there were opportunities to reintegrate, and there were loyalists who came home and did reintegrate. Um, but if you were associated with a murder, if you were associated with an arson, if you had made a powerful enemy, coming home was dangerous. And for, Thomas Crowell of Middletown attempts to come home after the war and is tar and feathered and sent packing. And there are a couple other episodes of vigilante violence being wrought on a couple of the pine robbers who attempt to reintegrate after the war. So, there were some who were successful. The ones who were successful in general had a lower profile and maybe less violence associated with their names than the ones who had a really rough time of it and ultimately could not reintegrate and needed to flee. And many of those folks end up in Canada or other parts of the British Empire.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about how crazy people get about their sports teams. If you're, so you can just imagine if, your barn was burned down or something like that, it's not just going to be welcome back, open arms.
Yeah, and there was even after the retaliators begin to fade at the end of the war, there's another group that starts up, led by John Burroughs Jr. of Middletown Point or Matawan, and it's called the Association to Oppose the Return of Tories, and it calls the loyalists atrocious monsters of wickedness, which is just like a wonderful word salad right there. But in any event, there is an active society in Monmouth County devoted to stopping loyalists from returning home.
Okay. So we have someone asking about, oh, now this is something that I was thinking and I had wanted to ask you. He wants to know who your favorite Monmouth characters are. And then he says Devil David Foreman. But before you answer that, I want to know, so there is a distinction between Devil David Foreman and Black David Foreman. Yes?
Yeah, this is I've had some discussions with people who study the Foreman family, and I'm not a genealogist, but I think the conventional wisdom and what's written up in Foreman family documents, genealogical documents on the family, is that there was a David Foreman who was a colonel of the Monmouth Regiment of the Flying Camp
Hmm.
and then a colonel of an additional regiment to the Continental Army. And this David Foreman is the one who then becomes a county judge and also the chairman of the retaliators. And he has a very complicated war record that includes getting censured a number of times by the New Jersey government and getting in trouble with the New Jersey government for being um, for not for not following the law and following legal due process in his prosecution of the war against loyalists. And there's a second David Foreman who is a cousin and is from Upper Freehold Township and would be the brother of the colonel from Upper Freehold, Samuel. And that David Foreman spent 2 years as the sheriff of Monmouth County. And I think that's the conventional wisdom on the two prominent David Foremans. I'll just caveat my statement there to say I'm not a genealogist, and they're for people who are Foreman family genealogists. I'm happy to defer to people who may know this at a level that I don't.
I'm sure. I think it goes that Black David is for his hair color, and Devil David is for his actions. So that would be the general difference.
Yes,
Would be
that's right.
Devil
Black
David.
David. I think I've heard the word swarthy
Yes.
associated with Black David.
Okay, so to answer his question, who's your favorite? That's
Um,
a tough one, right?
so yeah, it is hard. I'll offer a couple of quick thoughts on this. One is someone like SIP is
Mhm.
really interesting to me. It's so hard to find and piece together information on poorer people. They're just not in the records at the same amount. And so when I can create I can piece together a half dozen facts around a poorer person and show that person's really interesting Revolutionary War history, that's probably my favorite when I can do that. And so Sip, the runaway slave who becomes a loyalist partisan and then goes on to do some pretty interesting things after that. Maybe one of my favorites. Um, uh, there's a guy, Levy Conroe, who is not wealthy, but for just good luck, we have a lot of documentation on him. So I like his story. Simeon Babcock's another poorer guy with a good story. Um, in terms of the wealthier folks, names that might be familiar, uh, Asher Holmes is a favorite Monmouth County to me because he gets it from both sides. He suffers. He suffers at the hands of loyalists. Um, he suffers because he is not perceived as strident enough in his support of the revolution, and he has a frosty relationship with Foreman. He has a frosty relationship with the governor. His loyalty is questioned a number of times. But he strikes me as just like a really solid guy trying to follow the law and holding the militia together when there's all these forces trying to pull the militia and state troops apart. So among the more prominent people, I do have a soft spot for Asher Holmes.
Okay, that's cool. So you've been all in those papers at the archives, right? Asher
Yeah.
Holmes papers, yes. Okay. We have someone asking.
Yeah, and by the way, MCHA's collection, including you have some fantastic documents. My favorite of your documents is Retaliating Order 16, which is Foreman and a couple of Foreman's buddies sending a sort of a barb to Holmes for conducting prisoner exchanges outside of their authority. Now, of course, they're a vigilante society; they have no authority. But that is the only surviving document of the retaliators from the retaliators' pen about their actions and their understanding of the world after their founding document. So I love Retaliating Order number 16, which has
I have to
been
look that one
preserved
up.
in MCHA.
Susan is asking, this is, I don't know if you're going to be able, Daniel Hendrickson is my sixth great grandfather. Do you know any stories about him?
So Hendrickson is, of course, a very prominent name in Revolutionary Monmouth County. There's a Daniel Hendrickson from Middletown who is a wealthy squire and gets involved a little bit in the loyalist insurrections, but is sort of tolerated afterward because he doesn't get into the more violent stuff, and he sort of weathers the war afterward as more or less as a neutral. But the other Daniel Hendrickson is Daniel Hendrickson of Tinton Falls, who becomes the colonel of the Shrewsbury Township militia, and he's got a really interesting Revolutionary War story that includes having to leave the township for his own safety, um, mustering the Shrewsbury militia, which is no easy task because of the disaffection in the township. And so he has a lot of problems around that. He gets captured in 1779. He takes a shot at privateering in 1778. He gets himself into some trouble after the war for getting involved in some election day coercion of voters. He's a fascinating character, and there's a lot of really interesting content on that Daniel Hendrickson.
Is he in the 250 articles?
Yes, but there is no one article devoted to him. But if you were to, you can keyword search on the MCHA and the 250 collection, and yeah, he'll show up in at least a dozen of the articles.
Okay, there you go, Susan. See that? Kelly is asking, were some of her I don't know if you pronounce it Giberson relatives lost their property? Were the Dutch more inclined to be loyalists?
Yeah, the Giberson family is there are Gibersons in Upper Freehold. There are some Gibersons on the shore. A couple Gibersons become associated with pine robbers, and I believe one of them meets a bloody end as a pine robber. And there a number in Upper Freehold have their estates confiscated, and there are Gibersons who are involved in the Upper Freehold Loyalist insurrection of December 1776.
Okay, cool. And then we also have a fifth great granddaughter of David Wilson from the flying camp, which was pretty cool, Pennsylvania. All right. Do we have any more questions tonight? I really didn't think you were going to be able to answer that last one, so I'm super impressed. Anybody else have any more questions for Michael? No? Nobody? Okay. Well, thank you everybody for attending. We had a lot of people tonight, 186 people. So that's pretty great. You're getting a little bit of applause there. I don't know if you can see that.
No, but thanks. I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much, everyone, and please do patronize MCHA. It's an amazing organization and really one of the great local historical societies anywhere in the country.
Thank you so much. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks all. Take care.
Bye bye.